Hey everyone, Laura here.
Tanya here.
We've been friends for over a decade and worked together for a long time in call centers as agents, quality analysts, managers, and supervisors.
In 2018, we started up this podcast to talk about the batshit bonkers bullshit we see and continue to see in our time at work and at home as consumers.
This episode, however, is unique. We do these deep dive episodes where we talk about corporate scandals like Enron, scams like Theranos, or even cons like Scientology.
This is one of those episodes, so enjoy.
Love your faces.
Smooches.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.
This job would be great if it wasn't for the fucking customers.
You're always this stupid. Did you take lessons? Just calm down.
Oh, fuck you!
You can't handle the truth.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.
In other words, be nice, asshole.
Welcome to a very special set of episodes of Q as in Cucumber. I'm Laura Mack.
And I'm Tanya Edwards.
So today we're going to be discussing, we do these deep dives every now and then, and we just do one big long recording, and we're going to split it up and release it over the course of the next few weeks. So today, and we try to touch on like business scandals or frauds or things like that.
Huh.
So like we covered Enron, we covered Scientology. So this one, we're going to be discussing the scandal that managed to touch some of the most well-respected elder statesmen, like two former secretaries of state, Henry Kissinger.
Oh, Jesus. He's like 9,000 years old.
Exactly. And George Shultz, along with four-star general and former Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis. It also touched some of the most powerful and wealthy people in Silicon Valley and in venture capitalism, like Avi Tevanian. Fuck him, by the way. We'll get there. He was Steve Jobs' right-hand man for a decade.
You know what? As much as I like Apple, I never liked Steve Jobs.
No, and we'll get there. But he was also the leader of the team that developed Mac OS X. Holy crap. And along with Tim Draper, who was the first investor in this company, and he was also the first investor in Skype, Hotmail,
Wow.
Tesla. Like, this man has the money. It's not even funny.
Wow. You know what? I think they're just giving fucking Teslas away at this point.
I know.
I see like 5 a fucking day.
Right.
When I was in California, they were everywhere.
Yeah. So the person at the center of the scandal managed to scam almost $1 billion out of investors and scammed the state of Arizona's legislation into changing laws to make the commercial side of this scam possible. Like, they literally got a state to change its laws. It allegedly caused thousands of consumers incredible harm, mentally, financially, and in some cases, physically. Current and former employees were allegedly stalked, harassed, followed, sued, and all around treated like slaves and prisoners. Sound familiar? In one case, it almost permanently ripped apart a family, and, just like Enron, it even pushed one person to commit suicide.
What the hell?
It's so sad. We'll get there.
God.
So we're talking about the case of Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. Okay, so the basics of the story are thus. Elizabeth Holmes dropped out of Stanford after 2 years of engineering courses and founded Theranos, a medical device and laboratory company that promised to disrupt and revolutionize laboratory testing as we know it. She claimed to have developed a way to run over 200 tests for a fraction of the cost of traditional labs, all on a single drop of blood. Now, she kind of burst onto the scene with this flashy Fortune magazine cover that really made her a star. Like, she was the first billionaire female tech founder.
Wow.
And everybody was, like, losing their shit. Overnight, she was friends with Jared Leto, Chelsea Clinton. She was in wall-to-wall interviews and magazines. It didn't hurt that she was young and beautiful with a unique feature that caused people to do a double take and take notice. We'll get there. It's so funny.
Oh, Lord, will she have 2 different color eyes?
No, you'll see. She was jetting all over the world, meeting celebrities, world leaders, and being celebrated as the first female tech founder. Now, it would have been an amazing story if any of this were true. But it's not. So, the story, no matter what you experience, the podcast, the book, or the documentary, it all reads like a fucking John Grisham novel. It's amazing. And if you told me, like, before I started researching this, that a book that constantly references microfluidics and assay validation read like a Grisham novel, I would think you were crazy. But it does. It really is. With, like, you know, stalking, dramatic courtroom proceedings,
oh, Lord.
like crazy shit. You'll see. So, being the OCD person I am, sometimes, I devoured all 3: the book, the podcast, and the documentary. So, our sources for this are the documentary was what I saw first, and every one of them gives more insights than the others. Like, even there's stuff, the book is 12 and a half hours long. And even the book, there's things in the documentary and in the podcast that aren't in the book. And I'm assuming that was just edited or he didn't know or something. But all 3. So the documentary is called The Inventor. It's actually done by the same guy who did the Scientology documentary.
Oh, okay.
So he's going to sound familiar. It's called The Inventor, Out for Blood in Silicon Valley. Then I listened to the podcast. It's called The Dropout by Rebecca Jarvis of ABC News. That's about 5 hours because it's split up into a whole bunch of different episodes like this one. And it has a ton of interviews like with the players. So you actually get to hear directly from them. They also play the SEC testimony when they're under oath, which is super cool. I'm telling you, you got to listen to it. And the book, love the book. It's called Bad Blood, Secrets and Lies in a Silicon Valley Startup by Wall Street Journal investigative journalist John Carreyrou. He was the first journalist to question it. And if you remember, Bethany McLean, she was the journalist with Enron. Like, first one through the door takes bullets.
Right.
And he took some bullets for this story. Oh my God. The things they did to him and to his sources, fucking astonishing. It's crazy. So, with so much damning evidence and on-the-record sources, though, his articles were bulletproof. Now, I'll be referencing all 3 of these, but throughout this podcast, guys, I will call them the sources because and I'll specify like, oh, you need to listen to the book to get this, or you need to listen to the podcast to get this, or whatever. But I'll be calling them the sources. They're all fantastic, and they all paint a vivid picture of an alleged sociopath and criminal. We'll be saying allegedly a lot, because unlike the Enron story, this story is still going. Like, there still needs to be a trial for Elizabeth Holmes and her former COO and boyfriend, Sunny Balwani. They just set a trial date for summer 2020. And there's been some interesting developments in the last few weeks, which we'll get to at the end. Now, I'm Laura, and I do the research, and I put together the shows and all the emails and stuff. And I try not to tell Tanya anything before she shows up, because I love capturing her surprise. And your first impressions are always the best. Like, your first reactions are always perfect. That's why I don't tell you anything.
She won't tell me anything. Or if she's telling me what she's doing, she says, don't look it up.
Yeah. Now, we were going to do Bernie Madoff, which we will still get. But we will still get to. But this Theranos thing, I just happened to come across the documentary, and it's literally all I want to talk about now. Like, I am obsessed with this. This is all I want to talk about. It's crazy. So I definitely encourage everybody to check out those 3 sources because they're awesome. So I had never heard of this company.
Mm-hmm.
But a few years ago, I had Googled female entrepreneurs, and Elizabeth Holmes was the first picture that came up.
I just looked her up. I just looked at her, yeah. So she looks familiar.
Yeah.
She's... Where do I know her from?
Her picture's been all over the place.
Because I don't know where I know her from, because I just looked her up, because I didn't know what she looked like.
For a while, her picture was everywhere. She was pretty much like, I'd seen the picture, but I didn't know her name. I didn't know the story. So, yeah, that's her. So do you know anything about this story?
No, I don't.
All right, sweet. So like our Enron story, we're going to start with a little bit of psychology that might help to explain how the fuck this all happened. Okay, so in the documentary, there is this behavioral economist who talks about this experiment that they did, and this is fascinating. The experiment was you pick top or bottom. You say top or bottom, and you get it in your head, and you keep it, but you don't have to say it, you don't have to write it down, nothing. And you roll a dice. And whatever side you picked, you'll get the number in dollars. So if it's like 5 on the top, 2 on the bottom, and you chose 5 at the top, you'll get $5, right? But most people lie because as to which one they selected to get more. All of a sudden, people are super lucky, right? So they hooked them up to a lie detector, and it absolutely could detect that lie, right? But then they still had them hooked up to the lie detector, and they told them that the money would go to their favorite charity. The lie detector became completely useless. It could not detect a lie, right? Because now it's them lying for a good cause. So their body isn't having that reaction.
Right.
Like, I'm lying for my own personal gain, and I know it's wrong, but I want the money. That conflict is what the lie detector picks up. This company thought it was doing this amazing work that was going to change the world, and it was for humanity. So it seems like they justified their lies with that. They don't feel like they're lying because it's for the greater good. Yeah.
Okay. It's okay to lie if it's for something good.
Exactly. Like, oh my God, it's bonkers. So let's get started. Right. All right. Elizabeth Holmes was born in March of 1984 in Washington, D.C. Her mom was an aide on Capitol Hill, and she quit only to raise Elizabeth and her brother, Christian. Her father, Christian, he's interesting, and I want to know more about him. Like, the sources touched on him, but I'm like, I think you're the reason for all this. Elizabeth's great-great-grandfather was Charles Louis Fleischmann. Does that name ring a bell?
No, who is that?
Fleischmann?
Like the yeast?
Yes! He founded the yeast company.
Shut up. They're fucking...
So at the turn of the century, they were one of the wealthiest families in the country, right? They were friends with Amelia Earhart. Shirley Temple had a birthday party on one of their amazing properties. One of their properties alone had 40 rooms, and it had 41 servants full-time on staff. They would go on safaris. Like, they bought Coconut Island off of Hawaii.
See, you can't just buy shit from people.
But here's the thing. The next 2 generations totally blew all the money. So she was almost an heiress, right? And her father, Christian, clearly was bitter about this. Like, he was upset. So he instilled in her, and the reason why the money was gone was because these got her, the 2 guys, her great-grandfather and her grandfather, they were alcoholics. They had a parade of wives that took them for all they were worth, and they just had, like, frivolous spending out the wazoo. So her father really instilled in her that you can have that much money, but it has to be you living a purposeful life, right?
Okay.
So if you're living a purposeful life, then it's warranted. But if you're not, you'll lose everything. So he really instilled this in her. So her father seems like this super bitter guy that's like, and I get it. I would be a little upset too. But he seems like a guy that like had a winning lottery ticket and lost it until the day after it was the deadline. Like that's what he seems like. And that's me kind of inferring that. But yeah, he's just, I have the feeling that most of this is about him. Right. Now, he worked in a whole bunch of different government agencies on humanitarian projects, and they had pictures all around the house of him. I think it was called the Cuban boat lift, where a whole bunch of like, I think it said like 200,000 Cubans came into the United States all at the same time, and there were pictures of him helping them. I could be wrong on that, on what it was called. But.
Well, that was a thing, like back in, I want to say the late 70s, early 80s, that was a thing.
Okay, so maybe I do have it right.
and it was in Florida, and they had them like a town locked up in this caged like little area, and that's where they basically had them. It's kind of like our concentration camps we have today.
Yeah, no kidding. He actually, this is so funny. Right before the collapse, he actually went to work for Enron.
Really?
And he was just one of the rank and file. So obviously he didn't know what was going on.
Right.
But I thought that was crazy. But and once again, this is not in any of the sources, but I get the feeling that once he heard what happened at Enron, what was going on behind the scenes, I guarantee you that reinforced the purposeful life thing, because nobody at Enron was doing it for a good cause.
No.
They were doing it to get their fifth Porsche or their ninth gold-plated dildo or something. Like, it's ridiculous. They were friends, and this is something we're going to touch on, and we'll come back to it later. But they were friends. Her mother was friends with a woman named Lorraine Fuse and her husband, Richard. Now, the husbands did not get along because Richard's own son describes him as a megalomaniac, which should tell you a lot about what an awful person this is. And quite frankly, this is the one person whose life they really fucked up that I was happy about. So, and I'm sorry. Sorry, my opinion. Bleh. So, she got into Stanford in 2002 and moved to California. She was going for engineering, but she ended up taking a class on microfluidics and came up with an idea. Now, microfluidics is really interesting, and it's used in a ton of different fields. Everything from medicine to inkjet printers.
Wow.
And what it is, and I might be explaining this wrong, but basically what microfluidics is you shrink the size of something, a fluid so small, and you force it through a channel to go in a specific direction to where you want it to go, right? That's what microfluidics is. So her idea, even though she was not a medical student, she had an idea for a patch that had a biochip in it that would constantly sample the blood, and if it detected an infection, it would deliver antibiotics. Now, somehow she got connected to the former president of Panasonic, which I could not figure out how she got that connection.
Right, that's weird.
I don't understand. But he took her to a woman who's on a teacher, a professor, on staff at Stanford named Dr. Phyllis Gardner. Now, she has become a star of this because she's in the documentary and the podcast because she's so goddamn blunt. And she's like,
oh, is that the one who said she didn't trust her?
Yep.
So when I was just looking up her picture, it had a picture of that professor who said, I never trusted her.
She actually says that, students come to her a lot because she's been on the board of companies. She's helped students start companies, and they've made millions of dollars. So a lot of students tend to come to her.
Right.
She's like, it's rare that I have a visceral reaction to someone. I had a visceral reaction to her. Like, no. It just freaked her out. She's awesome. She's so funny. She basically explained that the idea for this patch was not possible. Why? Because antibiotics are not potent. Okay, they're not potent enough for you to shrink it down and fit it through a microfluidic channel.
That's why you have to take so many of them for so long.
Right. Thank you. See, even you and I understand this, and we didn't get into Stanford. Jesus Christ.
Because I know basic.
Yeah. So she's trying
life.
Right. So she explains to her, like, this is why you have giant bags of antibiotic fluid when you're in the hospital and you're about to have, like, seriously.
Yeah.
Apparently she just like blinked her eyes and left.
I mean, something like that would be good for like pain, but they do that already.
Right. So Phyllis felt like she was just a 19-year-old kid talking, and took one class on microfluidics and thought she was going to make something of it, which, okay, she's just... It's the hubris of a 19-year-old.
Right.
She ended up coming back twice and still trying to push this idea. And Phyllis was like, I can't help you. You're not listening. Right?
It's impossible.
So she connects her to Dr. Channing Robertson, who was known as like the cool professor on campus. He's old, but he has this unique ability to connect with his students, right? And he's kind of famous in some circles in the medical world because his testimony in the 90s against the cigarette companies led to that settlement, giant billions and billions of dollar settlement. So he is very well known. He's a tenured the head of the science department at Stanford. He ended up quitting and going to work for her. Yeah.
Oh. But people who have that kind of personality, they can talk you into and out of anything.
You'll see. So here's the thing that kills me about him. I'm going to say this because I'm trying to breathe because this enrages me. He compared her to Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, which was common. Everybody compared her.
Well, anybody who has some sort of magical startup like Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, and Bill Gates, they're all compared the same way.
Exactly.
The same way anybody who invents something is compared to Thomas Edison and everybody else.
We'll get to Thomas Edison. But he also compared her, believe it or not, to Archimedes. Now, I lost my goddamn mind when I heard that because Archimedes literally helped invent math and calculus. He invented the lever. Okay? What? You compared this bitch to Archimedes?
With some cockamamie half-wit idea.
Up. This is bonkers. Like, oh my God. So she talked her way into letting him letting her go on this trip to China, this summer trip to China, because her father made the kids learn how to speak Mandarin. So they were going for a SARS outbreak. And she talked her way into going. Okay. So she met on the trip. There was one other adult named Sunny Balwani, and he was the only other adult on the trip. And because she was so young, she was the only like freshman. She was getting picked on a lot. So he stepped in to like help her, come to her aid.
Oh, God.
He was 38. She was 18. And he was born, I believe, in Pakistan, but to Hindu parents, so obviously it was dangerous. They eventually moved to India, and then I believe India, and then immigrated to the United States. It seemed like dumb luck that he got where he got in life. He started a .com back in the late 90s, sold it for millions right before the bubble burst.
Oh.
So it was dumb luck, but to him, it made him a business genius, which, no, you fucking got lucky. He wore jeans, white button-down shirts, overpriced loafers, and reeked of cologne.
Probably like Drakkar.
Oh, God. He drove a Lamborghini and a Porsche with vanity license plates, one that said Das Kapital, an homage to Karl Marx, like anti-capitalist book. It's supposed to be
right.
Like, haha, you're wrong, Karl Marx. And another one that said Vini Vidi Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered by Julius Caesar. That's what his fucking license plate said.
How douchey can you get?
I know.
I mean, from your outfit to your license plate on your car. How absolutely douchey.
Yeah. You win the douchebag of the century award.
You get a little statue of a douche.
Now, when Elizabeth came home from China, she was calling him a friend. But soon they were dating. Now, here's what bothered me. The one thing that bothered me about the documentary. And I was like, see, it's not women. It can be, but whatever. They're interviewing all these people, and some of them are like, when I found out they were in a relationship, I was shocked. They weren't flirty. There was no chemistry between them. Like, it was crazy. But there were a whole bunch of men, not women, who are like, I thought there was something going on. They always came in at the same time. They left at the same time. They went on business trips together. I'm like, she's the CEO and he's the COO. I would think they would go on business trips together. But you and I have experienced this. Like, you talk to a man at work and all of a sudden you're fucking.
Right. And you know what? Lately I have realized that these fucking dudes are bitches.
Yeah.
They're worse than fucking women.
Absolutely.
And they gossip. Oh my God. They gossip and henpeck more than fucking women do. But get your fucking panties or something.
Exactly.
Jesus.
So they're all, that was the only thing I was like, oh, you're reinforcing that idea of just they were walking together, they're dating.
Right.
Like, oh, shut up.
God.
Now, he had something, he was significantly older, but he had something she needed. He kind of knew the ropes of Silicon Valley.
Right.
Right? And what he saw in her was something he could never be, this world-changing figure. So the two of them kind of got something from each other. So, here's the issue, though. In Silicon Valley, they have this fake it till you make it, like, idea about their tech.
Right.
Like, and it goes back to the days of Edison. Edison had told the world that he had solved the problem of the incandescent light bulb. He hadn't. He faked his demos. He faked. He kept reporters from telling the truth with stock in his company, and it took 4 years and was almost out of credit before he actually figured it out. But that's a tech company. That's not a medical product.
Right.
And the problem with Sunny being her mentor and all these other tech people, which we'll get to, they all had this same fake it till you make it idea, not thinking this is a medical product. If you're using it, it better be right. It better be working.
Because those are some lawsuits that you're going to lose.
Oh, yeah. So Phyllis Gardner freaks out when she heard that. She's like, no, this is bullshit. And the other thing that she points out, which is, she's right. If you look at the board of her company, there aren't medical people. There's like one doctor and then Dr. Channing, but they clearly weren't asking the questions. All the other board members have no medical knowledge.
They were probably not even practicing physicians. They were just, right. So
you throw out the term microfluidics and the person who knows nothing about medicine thinks you sound brilliant when you don't, right? So she pitched the idea. Now, eventually she came up with this idea of this one drop of blood. You take one drop of blood, because she has a fear of needles. One drop of blood, put it in a machine and have that machine run hundreds of tests on that single drop of blood, which would be revolutionary.
Right, but I know just to check for the 12 things they do my blood work on every 3 months, that's 4 vials of blood at least.
So that was her idea. And she went to a bunch of medical venture capitalists who all pretty much laughed her out of the room.
Yeah, because that's stupid.
So eventually she learned to go to non-medical venture capitalists, and they gave her money. If you look at all the people who invested, none of them were medical people.
So I'm going to go to a doctor's office and try to swindle some money out of some people for some technical stuff and see how that works.
Now, Channing Robertson was paid over $500,000 a year, which even being a tenured professor at Stanford, I'm sure that's way more money. than he was used to. But here's the thing. With the fact that there were so little medical people actually involved by design, and how Sonny got into this, because you throw out a word like microfluidic chamber and all of a sudden you sound like a goddamn genius when you're really a 19-year-old dropout. The scientists like Ian Gibbons, there'll be more on him later, she marginalized by putting him in charge of HR stuff. He was a Cambridge-educated PhD, like super smart inventor and doctor, and she put him in charge of HR stuff.
Stephen Hawking's running the goddamn cafeteria.
Oh my God. Oh my God, that's so funny. So basically, she used him and Channing Robertson. Channing Robertson, they were like, we don't even know what he did. Like, the former employees were like, we don't have a clue.
Just he's there.
She really just used them as window dressing. It's like they're featured heavily on the website that they're involved and they know to make people feel comfortable, but they're not. Like, she marginalized all of them. So to start her company, she had to come up with a name, money, and she had to drop out of Stanford, just like her hero, Steve Jobs. Now, side note, we'll talk more about this later, but her obsession with Steve Jobs is kind of hilarious.
Well, he was a fucking weirdo.
Oh, yeah. My favorite bonkers story about her obsession was when she told an employee that worked for her that Steve, like she
on first
knew
name
him,
basis,
like she fucking knew him, would not have allowed this conspiracy theory documentary to be available on iTunes if there wasn't something to it. And the other employee was like, you think that Steve Jobs has personally screened all of the movies on iTunes?
Right.
But that's where her age shows. That's where the fact she's so young.
Right, and still naive about certain things, like...
That's where it shows. She's still just a fucking 19.
You know what, and that's to show, like, with age comes wisdom. For the longest time, my brother David thought that everybody, because he grew up for a while in Germany, he thought everybody in the United States just broke out in song and dance, like on Mary Poppins and shit. God. For the longest time. That's what he thought.
Yeah.
He got here and was like, hey, how come nobody's singing and dancing?
Yeah.
I mean, that just shows,
yeah.
This isn't, come on.
So she went to a family friend that she was friends with this guy's daughter, right? And he was a third generation venture capitalist named Tim Draper. This is the guy who invested in Skype, Hotmail,
right? All that stuff.
And she pitched the idea. Now, this dude has not learned jack shit from this whole thing. He is the embodiment of the saying, the quote that says, it's easier to fool someone than to convince someone that they have been fooled. Right? He's still, to this day, he's like, I wouldn't back her as a CEO, but I'd back her as a scientist. Fucker, she's not a scientist.
She's not a scientist. She's a Stanford dropout who found a cool word and decided to play on it.
Uh-huh. And she wasn't even a medical student. She was an engineering student.
Who learned a cool word and decided to play on it.
She's fucking retarded. Now, he's in the documentary and he's wearing this tie with bitcoins all over it. And everybody freaked out.
Okay, so we have to look into that shit because I don't understand the bitcoins.
Yeah.
And the cryptocurrency. I don't get it.
So he cut her $1 million check.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
How come I can't meet people like this? Look, I got a great idea.
I know, right? So she ended up calling her company Theranos, which is a combination of the words therapy and diagnosis. Yeah.
Okay, honestly, I've heard that word before, but I thought, and don't think I'm stupid, it had something to do with the Fantastic Four, one of those Marvel movies.
Well, when I saw this, I saw
because isn't there a guy named Theranos?
Thanos.
Okay, so that's what I thought.
I ran across one of my favorite podcasts. They did an episode, and I thought it was a typo, that it was a review of Avengers. I was like, that must be a typo. But then I started listening to it.
Right.
And I was like, what the fuck are they talking about?
Right.
So that's how I came across the documentary, because they were talking about it like everybody should know this story. And I was like,
that's what I thought it was. Like that's what I thought it was at first. The first time I saw that word, I was like, the fuck is that? Some damn superhero shit?
Yeah.
Okay, well then.
So the first board member and the chairman. The first board member and the chairman was a man named Don Lucas. Now, Don Lucas was the mentor of a man named Larry Ellison, and another who eventually became another board member, who was the founder of Oracle.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, this Don Lucas moron, kills me. Oh, my God. There's an interview where he talks about investing in her, and he says that for a 19-year-old to say they're going to be the president of their own company, especially when they have not finished college, is very presumptuous. But then he found out that who her great-great-grandfather was. So he felt that entrepreneurship was in her DNA. Okay, fine. You still need to know things.
I'm sure her great-great whoever grandfather wasn't 19 years old and a fucking needlehead fucking dropout whenever he made these millions and millions of dollars.
But here's the thing. Then he finds out that her great-great-uncle or great-great-grandfather, I can't figure it out, on her mother's side, was the doctor who founded Cincinnati General Hospital and the University of Cincinnati's medical school. So what he says...
Oh, Lord, because she's got some medical people in her background. Now she knows about medical stuff?
Exactly. So if this is fucking stupid, and he throws in there, and she's attractive, which helps. I'm like, oh, you piece of shit. So let's break this down. Having those things in your DNA might make it easier for you to understand when it's taught to you. But if I went to my doctor and they had no, diplomas on the wall, and I asked, hey, where are your diplomas? And they're like, oh, I didn't actually go to college. I dropped out, but my grandfather was a doctor.
It's in my blood.
I would fucking leave. Why do you moron?
Okay, well, my dad was in the Army for 23 years. I tell you what, I think that I should be able to run the whole United States military. Get the fuck out of here.
This guy's such a
My grandpa was a farmer.
Thank you.
You fucking assholes.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know what? Sometimes people who have all this money really have no common sense to go with it.
Right.
Absolutely no fucking common sense.
It does make you feel like it's just dumb luck that they got all this money.
It has to be. Jesus Christ, I'm smarter than that, and I have no fucking money.
Exactly. But I think her relationship with Don really taught her how to manipulate these old, rich, white men. Because it seems like she took the time to stroke him, basically.
She's like a business hooker.
It's rare that a young, beautiful woman is sitting at your feet doing the, oh, yes, please share more of your wisdom with me. And it not only endeared them to her, it made them very defensive of her. So they attacked people they had worked with for decades, people they were friends with for decades. They attacked them and fucked them for her.
So she had some sort of weird, I'm cute and I have these ideas. Oh my God. You know what? And okay, this may be an asshole thing to say, but how many women fell for her dumb shit?
Not very many.
Okay. Well, that's because these men were thinking with their penises.
Exactly. And that's what Phyllis Gardner said. She's like, yeah, it was men. These men fell for her quote unquote charm.
And most sociopaths and narcissistic assholes are very charming.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
They could talk you out your drawers in a minute.
Now, they pretty much were willing to destroy their reputations for this bitch. Now, it was brilliant to do that, but it was not mystical. Yeah, but it was not as brilliant as her voice change.
She what?
Here we go. I'm going to play this little video.
Shut up.
This is what happens when you work to change things, and first they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world. And I have to say, I personally was shocked to see that the Journal would publish something like this.
Her voice, her deep baritone voice, was that fake too?
According to my sources, it was an employee who joined the company in 2011, had a meeting with her shortly after he joined, and It was late in the day, and they were finishing up the meeting, and she sort of expressed her excitement that he had recently joined, and as she got up, she forgot to put on the baritone and slipped back into a more natural-sounding young woman's voice.
Was everything about Elizabeth Holmes a fraud?
A lot of it was a lie.
No, it hasn't. Well, if I use traditional words to describe what we're doing, it's hard because people then associate it with conventional processes for analyzing drugs in development or whatever aspects we may be applying our technology to. But no, it hasn't. Well, if I use traditional words.
First off, the creepy fucking music.
Yeah. That's her real voice.
Okay, so I'm a little creeped out by the music, for one. For two, what the fuck? She's crazy.
Now, there is a possibility, and I'm gonna do it with our audio right now. There's a way to raise, because it was a podcast, there is a way to raise the pitch. So maybe the podcast people just did that, and I'll insert an example right here with the words I'm saying right now.
I'm just flabbergasted by this bitch. I really am. I don't understand. Okay.
But there's
a lot going on here. I think that she is a psychopath.
So, and they talk about this like it is a symptom of, like, I think they said a narcissist or a sociopath, I can't remember which one, that they imitate things to get what they want. Like, they use things to manipulate people more than...
Well, she could be classified as a narcissistic sociopath as well.
Right. So the research shows that women with deeper voices are trusted more and seen as more competent.
Because they sound like men.
So, think about this. Let's say a 19-year-old comes in and asks you for $1 million, right? And they sound like Britney Spears.
Right.
You're going to say no. But if they sound like Blake Lively.
Right.
Or Scarlett Johansson.
You might take them a little more seriously.
Right.
They don't sound like a child.
So I guarantee you she figured this out somewhere along the way. Because Phyllis Gardner also said when she came to her, she did not have that voice. And the next time she saw her, she was like, shut the fuck up.
Like she's been smoking, 3 packs a day.
Exactly.
Get out of here.
So, yeah. It was smart. And it made these men also, once again, very protective of her because they felt like she was unique and special. And, it made them sit up and take notice. So, now she had a name, the money, and the beginnings of a board. And the first few years, it seemed like quiet, kind of nose to the grindstone. This is the period of time where the book really dives in to see how the culture of Theranos was being built and how the paranoia started to settle in to the foundation of the entire company. Thanks, everyone, for checking out the first episode of our deep dive into Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. Make sure to subscribe so the next episodes automatically download as soon as they're available. If you enjoyed our show, please make sure to rate and review us on iTunes. And follow us on our Facebook page by searching Q as in Cucumber. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at QAIC_Lara, LARA, and QAIC_Tanya, TANYA. And we want to hear from you. Share your stories by emailing us at qasIncucumber@yahoo.com, and you might just hear them on a future episode. So until next time, love your faces.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.